Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
Now, there are all sorts of literary devices that God uses in the Quran, and one of them is the use of parables. So let's talk parables. What sort of parables does God use in the Quran?
And there are several, there's a difference. Some say between a parable and a simile. A simile, is when someone says this is like that. In the case of a parable, it's almost like comparing one situation with another. A certain situation is described. But I don't know if we can be so strict in delineating between these two types. But the Quran speaks of mathal, which often is translated by English translators as parable, and the plural is amthal. So, for example, in a famous passage of the Quran, which many Muslims have heard again and again, it says, لَوْ أَنزَلْنَا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ عَلَى جَبَلٍ لَرَأَيْتَهُ خَاشِعًا مُتَصَدِّعًا مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ وَتِلْكَ الْأَمْثَالُ نَضْرِبُهَا لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So, the 59th chapter of the Quran says, if we had revealed this Quran onto a mountain, you would have seen it crumbling due to the fear of God. These are the examples. These are the parables that we strike or coin for humankind so that they may take heed or so that they may reflect. So the Quran tells us what is the purpose of the parables. The purpose of the parables is that people might think, they might reflect. So how does it help you to reflect? Sometimes if something is just told to us as a matter of principle, it doesn't register. I mean, we hear the words, but it doesn't. We can't imagine how it is. But if something is given to us graphically, a situation is painted before us, so we can see that picture. So we can imagine the Quran coming down upon a mountain, and the mountain crumbling to bits. Why? Because the mountain is in awe of God. Well, of course, it doesn't happen that way, and mountains don't think like we think. But now that makes us think. Like, what's the similarity here? What is God trying to say to us? God is saying our hearts should not be as hard as rock. For even if it was the hardest rock and the Quran was coming down upon a rock, think of what would happen to that rock. What should happen to our hearts? So we should let our hearts be open for and receptive for the message that comes from God. So something like this is the lesson that comes from the parable. Sometimes it's even hard to put the lesson in words, but the picture is there in the mind.
Are there some parables that you can't understand, that are difficult to understand in the Quran?
Well, some are not so easy to understand, but we get the gist of what's going on. For example, in the 24th chapter, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, mathalu nurihi kamishkat. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. The parable of His light is as a lamp. So what does this mean? That the example of His light is like a lamp. And then it goes further into detail, and this lamp is in a glass, and then this glass is in a niche, it's light upon light. So Muslims come away from this thinking that God is like, the light of the heavens and the earth. He is like intense light. But to get more specific about that, and it's beyond us. And of course, to think about the nature of God, how He is, the essence of God, this is not easy for human beings. But we think about His attributes, and in this case, we're thinking about light as a sort of symbolism for God.
What's your favorite parable from the Quran?
Well, there is a parable that says that a good word is like a tree that grows. Its roots are firmly fixed in the earth, and then it grows up into many different branches, reaches up into the sky. So that gives the idea that if you do...
And then I believe it says something about fruit bearing from it?
Yes, exactly. And then other people will benefit from the fruit as well. So it gives you the idea that even saying a good word, that can lead to so much good in our world. And it doesn't cost us anything. As you know, one of the fast food outlets, they have this motto that smiles are free. And so the Muslim has the same motto as well. The smile is, a part of the sunnah, or the way of the Muslims, a practice of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And speaking a good word, where the Quran says, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, speak kindly to people. So you speak a good word, and that can have so much of an effect. You can brighten someone's day by just offering a compliment that doesn't cost you anything to give, but it might mean so much to that person, and so on.
What about the parable about charity? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It says that the example of giving charity is like one who plants a grain that grows into 7 ears, ears of corn apparently, and then in each ear there is 100 grains. So the one that you planted grows up into 700, it's multiplied. This is often mentioned in Muslim communities to encourage people to donate and give charity, because you give $1, but that's counted in the sight of God as if it's 700. But that only registers well in the mind because we have this graphic image of the one grain becoming 7 ears, and in each ear there is 100 grains. Mm-hmm. Moreover, in contrast with that, there is another parable, the parable of the one who gives for show, because naturally when we do a good deed, we want to do that for the pleasure of God, and not for show or name or fame. But some people will do things like that for name and fame, and the Quran is warning against that, saying that the example of such a person is like if you have some dust on a rock, then a heavy rain comes and washes away the dust. So that's like the charity that is given for show. Yeah. Like it doesn't remain with you. But then by contrast still, the one who gives charity for the pleasure of God is like one who has a garden that is watered with the heavy rains, and if not with a heavy rain, then even with a light mist, but that too serves to make the garden grow and give good fruit.
Dr. Jabir, are parables used in other religious traditions as well?
The most famous among the religious traditions for using parables is the tradition of Jesus. In the Gospels, it is mentioned that Jesus often spoke in parables, and sometimes he spoke in parables to the multitudes, but then he explained the parables to his companions.
Thank you for that, Dr. Jabir.
You're welcome.